Pro Football Playbook, presented by the Pigskin Podcast Network. Your source for team news, draft needs, player profiles and rankings, full Senior Bowl, Combine, and NFL draft coverage. News, analysis, discussion. It's in the playbook. Now, here is your host, sports journalist Bill Alvstad, and featured analyst Keith Myers. Hey, Pro Football Playbook Podcast listeners. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Welcome in, Keith.
It's another show for looking at rosters and off seasons and kind of getting a feel for what each team looks like now that free agency is essentially over. The draft is beyond us. Rosters aren't set, but we kind of know what teams are going to look like going into the season.
Yeah, we've done 4 teams so far. We're on to the Carolina Panthers and Chicago Bears in this show. We're talking about rosters, what teams have done in their entirety for the offseason and then in the draft. Just kind of sets the tone, if you will, for the regular season and training camp, and find out kind of where these teams sit. And we're doing it in alphabetical order. That's why we're doing it the way we're doing it. So let's start with Carolina. In the offseason, I thought they had just an okay type of offseason, really. I thought they had a really pretty decent draft. I thought that their best re-signing was probably DJ Moore, wide receiver. And then I really liked the Austin Corbett signing at guard. He's kind of a stable kind of guy. Damian Wilson, Deonta Foreman at running back kind of solidify that. And Xavier Woods. That was kind of their big offseason signings, if you will. But it's still hard to attract really decent talent for this team.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that it doesn't feel like too long ago was
Cam Newton and the big Superman show.
Yeah, there was that, and then that like great defense on the opposite side of it. They ground out games. They made it really hard on teams. Mm-hmm. Now it's just not the same. They're in rebuild mode. They're trying to figure this out, and it's a slow process. It's always a slow process, and they have more work to do. I do like what they started the process last year. They made a mistake at quarterback with Sam Darnold, and they're kind of stuck with it for another year. But they went into this draft and they did some good things as far as like the draft and going.
I agree.
Being able to get a guy like Ekwonu at 6, who's probably the best offensive tackle in this draft. I know some people would say Evan Neal, but that's not necessarily, it's debated that people will say Ekwonu. For him to come in, I mean, that's a cornerstone piece.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to make when you have so much to solve as a franchise and you're picking 6 in the NFL draft. It's hard to make that pick because you want to get the splashy move. You want to excite your fan base again. You want to maybe reach for a quarterback. Nobody really reached for a quarterback. You could argue Kenny Pickett to Pittsburgh, but they waited until the 20th pick or whatever to do that. So that was a huge thing. But getting Akeem Ekwonu at offensive tackle there at 6 overall, I think is probably the best pick that they could have made. It really kind of shows to me that they kind of know what they're doing a little bit in the front office. And is it Federer that's their GM? I don't have that information in front of me, but I think he used to work for the Seahawks front office quite a while back, and he's kind of making some calls there. And then Matt Rule's their coach, and they don't have a lot to work with, but they're really starting up front. I think they got Austin Corbett at right guard to come in. On the other side, their right tackle is Taylor Moton. So they're really pretty good shape up front. It's the rest of it that's kind of hard. You mentioned Sam Darnold. This is the Sam Darnold show. Still, again, that contract is hanging around them. I think they made a mistake there with the 5th-year option. But they did draft Matt Corral. And they did that at a really nice spot in the draft at 94 overall. Great value there. A guy that can come in, take a year to kind of process what NFL offenses are doing, what NFL defenses are up to, and be able to kind of be in the competition next year.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I mean, he's probably going to be in the competition this year. Like, is he going to be the week 1 starter? I wouldn't count on that. But if Sam Darnold, fails, which he did last year, and likely will again this year, you can go ahead and bring Matt Corral in midseason and let him, get some playing time, get some film of himself to self-scout next offseason. So he comes in a year from now in a significantly better spot. And he's a guy that if they're picking at the top of the draft next year, where there are quarterbacks, are you going, nah, we're not going to take one because we have Matt Corral? No, I
right.
wouldn't. You're still gonna pick the top quarterback. But if you're not, let's say you're picking 7th, and the 3 good ones are gone. Well, maybe you've got a guy you can build around, and so you might as well start that path now. I like that they went and they waited till round 3 to get a quarterback. They didn't take a 3rd or 4th round quarterback in round 1 just because, people said they needed a quarterback. If it's a 3rd or 4th round quarterback, don't take them in round 1. Take them in the rounds 3 or 4. And that's what they did. They waited, and it's going to serve them well.
So, their running back room is a little interesting to me. They've obviously got Christian McCaffrey. Who knows, right? I think a lot depends on Christian McCaffrey being healthy. They've talked about moving him this offseason. Nobody really wants to take that chance. Chuba Hubbard sitting there. I think he's a decent back. I think this team is sneaky good enough if Sam Darnold has a season where they could win, 7 or 8 games and surprise a few people with some more roster improvements this year. Likely not, but they could, and move themselves out of that quarterback conversation.
Well, it depends on how much Christian McCaffrey plays, because when Christian McCaffrey plays, he is such a difference maker. He's such a guy that can change games instantly. Yeah. When he doesn't play, this team's I think they're going to struggle. I mean, Chuba Hubbard's going to give them some reliability at running back, but McCaffrey changes your offense. He's that good. And having a guy like, DJ Moore out there at wide receiver, that's a piece you can, build around, win a title with, but it's the other parts that are around that. And more importantly, quarterback, I think is going to hold this team back, but there are some pieces to really like.
Do you know who their 3rd string tight end is without looking?
No, but I already looked.
Steven Sullivan. It's a name that we're familiar with that nobody else would be familiar with. I just think that that's pretty interesting. Okay. And then on the defensive side, Brian Burns is great. Derek Brown on the other side. Amara Darboh, they drafted. I thought Brandon Smith was a good value pick at 120 overall, the Penn State linebacker. I think he's better than advertised. Cade Mays is an interesting pick at offensive guard. I think he's just a rotational depth piece for them. And then Kellen Barnes was the fastest guy at the combine this year at corner at 242 overall. Let's see if they can work him in some sort of nickel package.
Or probably more of a special teams role this first year. I mean, he's got all that speed, but there's a reason why he was picked at 242.
Exactly.
Right? So, but they can use that speed on special teams while they continue to help him, learn the game and learn the position. But I mean, that's when you take guys like that, right? In the 240 range, because the upside is there, and that's all you can ask for in round 7.
And he's behind like J.C. Horn, one of the best nickel guys in the business too. So, okay, let's move over to the Chicago Bears. Chicago's interesting. They pretty much jettisoned their entire staff. Fired Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Ryan Pace was their GM. Matt Nagy, the coach. Nagy finished with a 34-33 record. They made the playoffs twice, but he failed to win a playoff game in 2 appearances. They hired Ryan Poles and Matt Eberfluss, offensive coordinator from Green Bay, Luke Getzey, defensive coordinator Alan Williams. Young guys, gives them an opportunity to really kind of work with the quarterback, upcoming quarterback in their new system. And they traded Khalil Mack for some picks. They really did kind of try to make over the team a little bit, and infuse the team with some young talent. I'm just not exactly sure where they're at in the process. You're in year 2 of a quarterback under contract for 5, under team control for 5 years, and so you got to kind of start moving a little bit.
It was weird that they went into a year where everyone knew, hey, if this doesn't work, the coach and GM are gone. And sorry, excuse me. They let that coach and GM pick a quarterback.
Yeah.
And then, of course it didn't work. They're not a great, it wasn't a good team around said quarterback. And then, now you've got a new coach and GM that come in that got this first round quarterback that they didn't pick.
Justin Fields. We're talking about Justin Fields.
Yeah. And so how sold are they? Like, how tied to them are they? I mean, really they're not, but at the same time they really are, because this team's not going to win unless Justin Fields develops and leads.
And they brought in Trevor Siemian to be the backup, and he's not going to win. He's not even a 500 quarterback, I don't think. No, he's a backup. So what do you think of their offseason? They released Nick Foles the other day. I'm going way back here. They signed Quimius St. Brown, the wide receiver from Green Bay, and then they brought in his offensive coordinator. I'm not sure. See, he never really worked out with Green Bay. Yeah. I thought he had some great upside when he came in, and he just never really developed. Justin Jones, their defensive lineman that they brought in, I think is really nice value there. Let me see. That's about it, really. And then they had the draft. Yeah. I thought Joaquin Brister is excellent.
Yeah. Didn't have a first round pick. And so they had to wait all the way to pick 39. And then they got Kyler Gordon, the cornerback out of Washington, which I like. He might not be as good as his teammate that got drafted earlier, but Gordon's a good player who's going to be a nice piece of that defense for a while. And then, 9 picks later, the guy that you were just talking about, Brisker at safety. I mean, those are a couple of guys that are going to be on the back end of that defense.
I agree. And they're immediate starters.
Yeah, instant.
Yeah, they come in and start, which is good. I mean, Brister's going to probably start at strong safety rather than free safety. They've got Eddie Jackson there at free safety. I think he's fine. Kyler Gordon's going to play on the right side, hold down that spot. And then Jalen Johnson is on the other side. Velus Jones. We talked about Velus Jones, I think way back in like January, and we did I think our very first mock draft. I picked him as like a filler on a mock draft at like 210th pick or 225 overall. And I was like, I really kind of like this guy. I think he's going to move up a little bit. And he ended up going 71 in the draft. I thought was crazy.
And as we got closer to the draft and as more of the draft media began to, take notice and get around to watching his tape, he was just jumping up draft boards, and there's a reason for it. This is a good player, and
he had 4.32 speed too.
That helps. But no, he is a take the top off the defense kind of guy, and he's going to create a lot of space for other guys and his quarterback to work underneath. And if teams don't respect that speed, he's going to run right on by him, and Justin Fields is going to be able to throw some deep touchdowns. So great pick.
I thought one of the more interesting picks that they had was Braxton Jones out of Southern Utah. I was kind of attracted to Braxton Jones for a few teams that needed kind of an athletic tackle, a guy that could move in space quite well. He's a little undersized. I think he's around 310 pounds, 6'4.5", really long, athletic, can move in space, but played in a small conference, small school. That's why he went 168 overall, but he's number 2 in their depth chart at left tackle there for Chicago, behind Larry Barone and I don't know. He may provide some competition there as time goes on. Anybody
I
else
could see it.
interesting?
I could see that being the thing. I don't know. I have a more penciled in on the right side than the left side, but um, there's some nice pieces on that offensive line.
Yeah.
Even if Jones, takes a year or two to develop. I like Cody Whitehair. I know he's had some issues,
Mm-hmm.
at times, but I think that overall the talent's there. And I still think, and I know I'm probably the only person who still thinks this, that Sean Coleman is someone that can
I
develop into being
know. I
a
always
good
thought so
player.
too, but he's sitting there on their right side as their number 3 overall right
Yeah.
tackle on the team. So there's a chance he might not even make it.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that, move him inside the guard and give him a chance because he's a guy that can do that. But the that's just a weird evaluation, I guess. Maybe I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's pretty obvious I screwed that up, but
Me too.
okay.
I was on that boat. I mean,
I
I
thought he
think
was going to be a
he
better
played
player.
it. Didn't he play at Alabama? And we're talking about Alabama, right? Or Georgia or somebody back there in the SEC. And I thought he was starter material when he came out of
Auburn. He played in
college.
Auburn at Auburn.
Auburn.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about their defense, Keith?
So their defense is interesting. I mean, it really is. I mean, guys like Robert Quinn coming off the edge. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard not to like that.
I like Robert Quinn.
And so overall, like, there's some stuff to like here. I think that, there might not be the name recognition for people who aren't fans of the team. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be like, other than Robert Quinn.
Well, I like
There's not going to be.
Roquan Smith. I think Roquan Smith is one of their best players. Their
Oh,
middle linebacker. Yeah.
absolutely. I'm just saying, like, on a national level, like, there might not be a lot of name recognition. There's no Brian Urlacher that when you say that name, every single person who is remotely interested in the
Right.
NFL knows who they're talking about. But honestly, that doesn't really matter to me. I like that, you've got Jalen Johnson on the
Mm-hmm.
back end. You've got Kyler Gordon on the back end. Duke Shelley, I think, is underrated. Brisker is probably going to be a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Jackson is also back there at free safety. Like, that's a good
Yes. They
secondary.
have a nice young nucleus to build around. Save Robert Quinn. I mean, he's been around a little bit. I don't know how long he's going to last, but he's very good right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they have some young players to build around. And I like their coach. I mean, I really do. I like Matt Eberflus. He's kind of a defensive minded guy, although he's not going to call defensive plays. He's I've probably got that backwards. He's an offensive guy. He's not going to be calling their plays, though. He's going to be kind of their head coach. He's going to let the offensive coordinator, Luke Etsy, come in from Green Bay, and then the defensive coordinator, Alan Williams, I really like as well. Young mind in the business that's going to come in and I think we just kind of shape this defense. They're changing from a 3-4 to a 4-3, so they're going to have some growing pains. And I don't see them winning many more than 5 or 6 games this year. But getting themselves in position next year, I think that Justin Fields' development this year is going to be a key factor on where they end up, even 2-3 years from now.
I mean, of course,
because they're going to. Otherwise, they may end up having to start over, which you don't want to do. Justin Fields had so much upside.
He still has so much upside. I don't want to look. I mean, I don't want to look at last year and his stats and be like, oh, well, he's probably going to bust out because that coaching staff was so bad. And what
do you think of them losing Allen Robinson, one of his main weapons?
Well, I mean, that's going to hurt, but they did add Velus Jones. And I think that you can build an offense without Allen Robinson. I mean, yeah, he's a nice guy to have out there and a really nice piece, but this is a team that's going to win with their defense, ball possession, a big play here or there, ball control, that kind of stuff. They're going to win in that manner, running behind David Montgomery and that kind of stuff. And to me, I'm like, okay, yeah, they lost that one big weapon and that's going to hurt, but they long term, I think, replaced it with Velus Jones. And so I'm okay with that. I think this is a team that's going to be. I know you were saying 5 or 6 wins. I think they're going to be 8 or 9. I think they're going to be. They're not a playoff team in my mind at this point. But they're there. Where they're a couple of other pieces and development of their quarterback away from being able to compete for that.
I mean, I can see that. I think that 7 or 8 is probably too much. I think that that's their high upside. I'm not convinced that Justin Fields is going to be able to take this team. I just have to see it. I mean, and I just don't know if he's got enough weapons. I mean, if you look at their depth chart, I just don't see a lot of weapons there for him to throw to. So we'll see.
No, and you're not wrong on that. I mean,
they have listed St. Brown as their starting wide receiver, and he's barely taken any snaps in the NFL.
Yeah,
they've got Brian Pringle and Darnell Mooney, and that's it. Dante Pettis is kind of their 4th wide receiver, and then you've got Velus Jones, but yet unproven. I don't know. Cole Kmet is their tight end, but after that, they really don't have anything. David Montgomery is David Montgomery, but then they've got Khalil Herbert.
A guy that they did add, very under the radar, but can be, a back of the end receiver weapon that can really help out their quarterback is David Moore. No, not the star wide receiver, the other David Moore, who played last year in Carolina and before that in Seattle. Was a guy that was steady for Russell Wilson.
He was steady.
He wasn't spectacular, although he would make a couple of plays and you're like, there's the talent. And then he would disappear for an entire half and you wouldn't see him.
Or 3
Not
games.
that they pulled him, or a game, or 2. But there was always production. There always has been for him. He's a guy that could come in, be that 3rd or 4th receiver, and just never be a guy that everyone's like, hey, this is, our go-to guy or anything. But then he just makes enough plays to keep his quarterback, positive.
He's a possession style receiver. I think he could be used really effectively in offense. I think he ran like a 4.52 or 4.5 440. So he's not a speedster by any means, but he's got some nice size to him at almost 6'2" and 205 pounds or something like that. And reliable hands. So he may move up and make a difference for them.
So, I mean, like I said, the offense isn't going to be special this year. I think
that's what's going to hold them back. Their defense can be all that, but man, if they can't score any points, I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't think if their defense is all that, they don't have to score a lot of points, right? They can win games, 17-14 or whatever. And I think they can do that. They just need to make sure they don't turn the ball over. That's really what it's going to come down to. Convert some 3rd downs. Don't turn the ball over. Let your defense
quick tempo
win games.
Yeah. So we'll see. Anything else?
No. Only other thing is I'd say if the Bears could be good, that would do me a favor because my father-in-law would be happy. And so, those of you that are listening,
go Bears.
If you have any control over the Bears, which I know you don't, because you wouldn't be listening to us, please have them be good. Just as a favor.
Do we admit that we might like the Bears more than we like the Packers, or do we like the Packers, Keith? I don't know. We're trying to be neutral on this show, but the Packers have had quite a run. Let's let the Bears come up.
Yeah,
or the Lions. I really like the Lions too. I do.
I am all in favor of entertaining football, and I don't have other than my team, I don't have secondary rooting interests other than good football and fun storylines for us to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. That's very fair.
And the Bears being good and the development of Justin Fields is good football and a storyline for us to talk about, and I'll be happy. Same with the Lions. If they turn around and that roster starts to look good and they're ready for a quarterback that can, jump in and make them a legit team, that's good football and interesting. If
I'm
the
a Dan
Lions
Campbell fan.
continue to be terrible like they have been since Barry Sanders retired, then that's not good football, and it's really not that interesting. So, yeah, I'm all for that. I'm also kind of for the Packers falling back to the pack, because even though that's maybe not as good a football, it's still interesting. And watching the drama that will happen with Aaron Rodgers and everything, especially after they traded away his favorite weapon. Okay, that will be really interesting. So
yeah, that's true.
I will be okay with that this year.
All right. Find Keith and his opinions on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at Alvstad _or Alvstad NFL, and find the show at PF_playbook. You can find us on Pro Football Playbook .com or .co, and you can find the show on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. And make sure you subscribe and share. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Football Playbook Podcast. Follow Keith at Myers NFL. Bill is at Alvstad NFL. The show is at PF_playbook. Listen and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or YouTube, and at our website, profootballplaybook.co.